All right, a very happy Saturday morning, especially if you were in Southern California. Congrats to the Lakers for getting to the Western Conference Finals. Not a great Saturday morning if you are in Northern California and you are a Golden State Warrior fan, although you will have 4 championships already. So not every year you can win it all. And we will see what happens with the Warriors offseason. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive video. You can find the Golden State offseason article on ESPN.com. Two separate ways you can find it. Same article. One is where all 25 teams that have been eliminated that are actually have started their postseason or offseason already. Golden State's there, New York is there, anywhere all the way to Charlotte, Detroit, teams like that. And then there's a separate article where you can find it also on the ESPN homepage. It's basically the same thing, but we kind of put Golden State. We did that with Phoenix, kind of on their own little bit of island. Golden State enters an offseason, probably, I would say probably the, I don't want to say like the, I'll say it, the biggest offseason in franchise history. I mean, that's the reality of it here. It's kind of where they are as far as a crossroads here. They've been here before, right? They were here in 2019 after Durant left to go to Brooklyn. They did the D'Angelo Russell trade. They wound up going into the lottery. That was the COVID year. They drafted James Wiseman. The following year, they get into the play-in. They lose to Memphis. They get Kuminga. We all thought the dynasty is over, and then boom. Last year, they beat Boston in 6 games to win the NBA championship, and we had thought that the roster returns, another year under their belt. This team would be up there competing for a championship, but they lose in 6 games to the Lakers. And the offseason, there's a lot of different ways we can go here. I mean, there is the future of Draymond Green to figure out. He's got a $27.6 million player option. There is the future of Klay Thompson to figure out. He is extension eligible. He can extend for 4 years, $210 million. We'll talk about him in a minute. There is the future of Bob Myers, their general manager, the architect of this team, whose contract expires on June 30th. There is the future of Jordan Poole to figure out, who's coming off that 4-year, $128 million extension that he signed last October, is tradable starting July 1st, as we saw in the playoffs. Certainly a below average, and that's being kind, playoff performance for Jordan Poole. So how does he fit in? Then there's also the new collective bargaining agreement that is going to rear its ugly head in the Bay Area. When we're looking at a Golden State team that likely will not be able to retain Dante DiVincenzo because the Golden State does not have their tax mid-level exception, and DiVincenzo is going to probably opt out of his contract. He can only sign for 120% off his current salary, so $4.5 million. That's right north of 5 and change. You are going to likely lose him. The luxury tax penalty, we've talked about it ad nauseum. You are looking at potentially $500 million in salaries and tax penalties when it all says and done. Largest in NBA history. Remember, this team was bought for $450 million by Joe Lacob. You have $210 million in committed salary already entering the offseason. It's a big number, and we knew it was a big number when you did the Wiggins and Poole extension last year, and we knew this day was eventually going to come, and here it is. Now you've got basically kind of 6 weeks to figure out what direction. You've got the 19th pick in the draft, so you could get value there. You are allowed to trade that pick the night of the draft. Although you owe Memphis in 2024 first, you can trade that pick the night of the draft. Your free agents are Green, DiVincenzo, JaMychal Green, Iguodala, Ty Jerome, Anthony Lamb, Lester Quinones. Okay, Green is going to be the focus here, right? $27.6 million player option. Different ways you can go here. You can have him opt in and extend off that number. You can have him opt out or decline that and do a new deal here. If you ask me right now in mid-May, I would say there is a strong likelihood that Draymond Green is going to be on the Golden State roster. What's the number? Could it be 3 for 90? I think whatever the number is, you align it with the Steph Curry contract. I mean, here's the thing, we can talk about Green and Thompson leaving, but Curry is still under contract for another 3 seasons and is playing at and an extremely, extremely high level. So it's not like you're going to all of a sudden, you're not going to gut this roster and still have Steph Curry on here. I mean, you might as well trade him if that's the case. So Green is going to be the big thing. The interesting thing with Draymond is that outside of Golden State, what is his market? Like, what is his market value for him? Because we've talked about the teams with cap space, whether it be Orlando and Houston and San Antonio and Indiana and OKC and some of those teams here. And if it's outside of that, then it's got to be a sign and trade here. And for Golden State, I think you might rather have Draymond Green on your roster than going out and getting 2 or 3 other players or free agents, because the reality is he is the heartbeat of this team. You could see his impact on the court. Does he fit all 30 teams? Likely not. Does he fit Golden State? Yes. So I think it's important for you, for both sides, to figure out what the number is going to be. I think 3 for 90 is, I'm comfortable paying that number if you're Golden State here. That's your priority. That's your top front office priority here. I mean, the impact of him on the court is ridiculous. I mean, I can throw stats at you all the time. As I mentioned in here with DiVincenzo, $4.7 million player option. The most that Golden State can pay is $5.4 million. You're likely losing him, okay? So then what does that mean to the rest of your bench? This is where things were supposed to, kind of the wheels in motion were supposed to happen. You were supposed to have Jonathan Kuminga contributing, a high-level rotation player, and had a pretty good regular season, but we was basically in the witness protection program during the playoffs. You're basically relying on Kuminga, Moses Moody, Patrick Baldwin, because of outside of making a trade, you have your 19th pick in the draft, and you have the veteran minimum exception. So you're playing that minimum game again. Remember, a few years ago, you went out and got Iguodala and Otto Porter and that group. Because of your finances, your tax mid-level exception is no longer here. Okay? So that is where your resources are for this roster. Now, in regards to the new salary, the new collective bargaining agreement, the teeth of the new collective bargaining agreement starts in 2024-25. So basically, you are going to be allowed to get your finances in order and still kind of operate and build your roster, possibly in trades. You can take back players 110% in salary back. The following year, you can't aggregate salaries. So there's basically, for the next year until next offseason, you have a little bit more margin to go out and be aggressive, moving contracts, signing players, except for, I said, the tax mid-level exception. The buyout, you can't sign a player who's bought out and his original contract was more than the non-tax mid-level exception. You would have been able to get JaMychal Green here. So that is kind of where your roster is, and that's going to be the big question now is what do you do with Jordan Poole? 4 years, $128 million extension signed in last October. Will be trade eligible, as I said, in July. Are you looking to kind of, as I said, break that contract up into 2 players? Is there one player out there? I'm not going to just start spitballing names out there, but if there's a likely guy out of this roster, it's going to be Jordan Poole, just because of where his fit, basically where, this roster is still championship worthy, but you've got to kind of balance things out here, and you've got Gary Payton in that trade. You've got a little bit of depth as far as your backcourt, but the Poole question is going to linger over this organization all off season here. And when I put my slide up and I had value contract, people were like, oh, value contract, he was terrible. Yeah, we have to look at the big picture here, body of work here. Like, I know we're going to focus in just the Lakers series and kind of what happened in Sacramento, but it's still a player that is in not even the prime of his career, and we've seen him play in big games and contribute. And for a guy making $26-27 million, there will be a market for him. Now, what's the return value? That's going to be the big question here. Extension candidates, Klay, as I said, he's got a year left on his contract. 4 for $210 is the max. I'm not extending Klay Thompson 4 for $210. Am I giving him 2 for $70? I would, because that aligns you with Steph Curry. See what we're doing? We're aligning all our contracts with Curry. But I'm not doing 4 for $210. And if he doesn't want to do that, then you let him play out the season on an expiring contract. You're not paying him $61 million in 2027-28. It ain't happening, kids. As far as team needs, we saw a little bit of it in the Lakers series. When you go that small lineup and you've got basically JaMychal Green, you've got a stretch four out there that can make shots. That's going to be your big thing. Front court help that can stretch the floor. Green shot 30% from three. Looney didn't attempt a long distance shot. Reserve Anthony Lamb shot 37%. Your focus is front court depth that can stretch the floor. And then as far as your future draft assets, as I said, you have your own first in this offseason, and then you own Memphis, a top 4 protected first in 2024. The big thing will be the second apron as far as how it impacts his team, but that's next offseason's video. It's for 2024-25. But the Green contract and what happens with Wiggins will have a domino effect as far as what type of restrictions this roster faces a year from now. But from right now, you have to figure out who's in charge of basketball operations with Bob Myers' contract expiring. What do you do with Draymond Green? That is a priority. The future of Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson's extension, the financial angle of it will work itself out, right? Like the Golden State knew when they did the Wiggins extension and the Poole extension in last October that there was going to be a new CBA that had some teeth in it here. And they're going to pay the penalty a year from now. But you can still kind of get your finances in order, and that's why the priority, for me at least, is kind of figuring out, can you get a $16 million guy and a $10 million guy for that Poole number. So hopefully everyone has a great weekend.